Welcome back to Random History. I'm your navigator as we explore the little known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. The events I delve into are probably not ones you learned about in school. These are the ones that when you do hear about them, you're likely to think that they could not possibly be real. But they are. Today marks our 25th episode, and it deviates a little bit from my usual stories. While it is a very bizarre event, it is a bit more well known than my previous topics. I have always wanted to visit Australia. I'm not sure why, maybe it's the unique wildlife or the vast open spaces. Whatever the reason, I just want to travel there someday. When I taught middle school science, I told my students an old joke about Australia. I asked them, "Do you know why Australia has so many unique animals?" When they said no, I told them that the joke was, when God finished creating all the animals on Earth, he took the leftover parts, put them together, and placed those animals in Australia. The kangaroo, the koala, and the platypus are all fascinating creatures, but some of the animals down under have created massive problems for the Aussies. In the 1800s, a transplanted nobleman brought in a handful of rabbits so he could go on a traditional English hunt. Unfortunately, those rabbits escaped and did what rabbits do. With no natural predators for them, the rabbit population quickly approached 1 billion rabbits. These animals absolutely decimated the Australian agriculture in many parts of the country. But the rabbit invasion is not the focus of today's episode. There is another Australian creature that threatened Aussie farms. This threat was met with force, military force. They literally sent in the army to eradicate this menace. What creature was it? The emu. The Great Emu War of 1932 stands as one of the strangest chapters in recent military and environmental history. It was not your typical war. Instead, it was the Australian government's attempt to control the damage caused by a massive population of emus. Those big, flightless birds native to Australia. These birds were actually laying waste to farmlands in Western Australia. Today's episode takes a look at the beginnings, the actions, and the results of the Great Emu War, and what it means for how Australia deals with environmental issues and policies. The start of this conflict can be linked back to the tough economic times of the Great Depression. Farmers in Western Australia, who were already dealing with falling agricultural prices and shrinking incomes, suddenly had a new problem on their hands. Emus. Looking for food and water, these birds started moving in large numbers to farmlands, where they destroyed crops and messed up irrigation systems. The explosive growth of the emu population quickly led to big financial losses for farmers. In response, the government decided to take extraordinary measures, enlisting military personnel to address the burgeoning problem. In late 1932, Major G.P.W. Meredith, leading the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery, sent soldiers into the field with a mission: to control the booming emu population using machine guns and other military-grade equipment. The decision to deploy military force against a bird species was both unusual and a sign of last resort, reflecting the depth of the economic troubles and the few choices left for officials to consider. Even though the soldiers were well trained and armed with advanced weapons, the emus showed an impressive ability to evade capture and withstand the pressure. The plan had been to round up the birds and trap them, making them easy targets for the machine guns. But this strategy quickly ran into practical problems. Emus, known for their speed and erratic movements, easily broke away into small, swift groups, making it tough for the soldiers to use their standard military tactics. One memorable example of this struggle was when a machine gun got so hot it overheated and malfunctioned and became unusable, while in another, the birds simply outran the advancing troops. The operation's first stage, which kicked off in November of 32, almost ended in a complete fiasco. The military soon found out that their usual way of fighting just did not work against a mobile, non-fighting group of birds. They tried again in December, but the results were just as bad, barely making a dent in the emu population. The soldiers were getting increasingly fed up, and the public, who had initially supported the effort, started mocking and criticizing the government's unusual approach. The Emu War was not just a military blunder. It also showed how tricky the relationship is between human economic activity and nature. Emus had evolved to do well in Australia's tough and always changing environment, which made them really adept at adapting. They were hardy birds and bred quickly, so even a big effort to kill them off could not easily stop their numbers from growing. The Great Emu War underscored the limitations of force-based strategies in controlling wildlife and prompted a broader reflection on the ecological balance between agricultural practices and native species. Critics of the operation argued that the resources spent on the military campaign could have been better allocated. Alternative strategies, such as constructing effective barriers, improving water management systems, or even implementing targeted, controlled culling methods informed by ecological research, might have yielded more sustainable results. The Emu War thus became a case study in the potential pitfalls of applying blunt military solutions to inherently ecological problems. The Great Emu War has, throughout the years, turned into a topic that Aussies both chuckle about and use to make some serious points. Australians often tell the story with a mix of laughter and no way. It's a good reminder that even when you have all the fancy gear, nature can still get the better of you. The pictures of soldiers toting machine guns bested by a bunch of birds has really stuck with people, and is often mentioned as one of the most bizarre moments in military history. There are so many documentaries, books, and even funny cartoons that have taken another look at this whole bird business, each one giving us a different way to think about how technology butts heads with nature. These cultural tidbits serve as symbols for the bigger problems we face when humans try to mess with the natural world. In a way, the emu has become a symbol of just how little control we humans actually have over nature. A lesson that still comes up when we talk about saving the planet and doing farming in a way that won't hurt it in the long run. After the Emu War, Australia's way of dealing with wildlife slowly started to change. Instead of using the military, the country began to use more scientific and well-rounded methods. These new methods included things like better fences, changing habitats in specific ways, and carefully controlled culling, all as part of the bigger plans to manage pests. The goal was to find a balance between successful farming and protecting Australia's special environment. This shift in how things were done shows how much was learned. The Emu War did not work, which highlighted how important it is to be flexible and use scientific research when making decisions about the environment. Today, Australia's efforts to protect its environment focus on working together with the government, scientists, and others all playing a role. The Great Emu War also prompts reflection on ethical issues related to the use of force in wildlife management. Employing military resources to manage ecological challenges raises questions about the appropriateness and long-term consequences of such strategies. Critics contend that the Emu War illustrates the dangers of prioritizing short-term economic relief over sustainable, humane, and ecologically sensitive solutions. As debates over conservation and biodiversity continue worldwide, the legacy of the Emu War serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of imposing human will on nature without a nuanced understanding of ecological dynamics. Furthermore, the incident has influenced contemporary decisions about the ethical treatment of animals in conflict scenarios. While the birds were not targeted out of malice, but rather as a means of economic survival for the farming communities, the indiscriminate nature of the military approach raised concerns about animal welfare, a debate that remains as relevant today as society grapples with ethical questions in wildlife management. The Great Emu War is still a fascinating part of Australia's past, a tale of the sheer oddity of using the military to battle a stubborn flock of birds, and a bigger lesson about how people interfere with nature. Even though the soldiers really did lose the war, the whole thing had a big effect on how we think about taking care of animals and nature. What we learned from this very strange war still helps us today as we try to balance business needs with keeping the earth healthy. Thinking back to what happened in 1932, people making decisions now and those working to protect nature can see why we need smart, science-backed answers instead of just using force. The Emu War teaches us that nature is often too complicated for easy fixes, and that we need to really understand how nature works if we want to take care of it properly. So the story of the Emu War is important not because it was a military failure, but because it was a great lesson in humility, innovation, and the ongoing challenge of coexisting with nature. One of my favorite poets is Paul Laurence Dunbar. He was from Dayton and was a high school classmate of Orville Wright. One of Dunbar's greatest poems is Sympathy. There's a phrase that Dunbar repeats throughout the poem. I know why the caged bird, whether it was beating its wing or why it sings, he was referring to Black Americans. As I transition from the story of the Great Emu War to today's hero, we switch from a literal flightless bird to a figurative one. Unlike the emu, however, our hero did learn to fly, literally. He became one of the most decorated of the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II. His name? General Charles Edward McGee. Charles Edward McGee, who lived from 1919 to 2022, was a truly remarkable American pilot. He was one of the Tuskegee Airmen, the groundbreaking African-American pilots in the U.S. military during World War II. His career in the service lasted for over 30 years, and he flew an impressive 409 combat missions throughout World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. His achievements were not just about his flying prowess. He also helped break down racial barriers in the military. McGee was born on 7 December 1919 in Cleveland, Ohio, to parents Lewis Allen and Ruth Elizabeth Lewis McGee. His dad wore many hats: teacher, social worker, Methodist minister, which meant the family moved around a lot when McGee was growing up. He lived in Ohio, Illinois, and Iowa during those early years. In 1940, he made Eagle Scout, a testament to his leadership and dedication to service, even back then. With the onset of World War II, McGee enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1942. He was selected for the Tuskegee Flight Program, an initiative designed to train African-American pilots amidst the prevailing segregation of the era. McGee earned his pilot's wings in June of 1943, becoming part of the 332nd Fighter Group, famously known as the Red Tails, due to the distinctive red markings on their aircraft. During World War II, McGee piloted the P-51 Mustang, widely regarded as the top fighter plane of its era. He flew 136 combat missions, mainly protecting bombers over Europe. The Tuskegee Airmen, famous for their impressive skills, were praised for never losing a single bomber they were escorting. In fact, the bomber crews would specifically request the Red Tails escort their formations deep into German territory. Their achievements were crucial in dispelling common myths about the abilities of black pilots. Following World War II, McGee stayed in the military and joined the newly formed U.S. Air Force in 1947. He saw action in both Korea and Vietnam, adding another 273 combat missions to his record. Throughout his entire career, McGee logged a remarkable 6,308 flying hours, highlighting his dedication and exceptional talent as a pilot. By the way, flying 6,000 hours in a fighter is remarkable considering their sorties are typically only a couple hours long. Unlike a tanker or cargo plane like I flew in, where a typical sortie might be as much as 6 to 8 hours long. For his outstanding service, McGee was showered with praise, including the prestigious Distinguished Flying Cross. Although he hung up his uniform and retired as a colonel in 1973, President Donald Trump would add to his legacy in February of 2020, giving McGee the honorary promotion to Brigadier General. In 2007, along with his fellow Tuskegee Airmen, McGee was given the Congressional Gold Medal, the top civilian honor in the country. McGee was not just about his military accomplishments. He was also a passionate supporter of aviation and education. He often talked to young people, telling them about his life and urging them to explore careers in aviation and STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. His story is truly inspiring, showing us the power of never giving up, striving for greatness, and tearing down racial walls. General Charles McGee's tale is a powerful part of American history, highlighting the Tuskegee Airmen's contributions and sacrifices. His legacy continues to inspire generations to come, reminding us of the strides made and the hurdles jumped in the quest for equality and excellence in serving our country. Several years ago, there was a Hollywood movie made about the Tuskegee Airmen called Red Tails. While critics didn't really seem to like the movie that much, I enjoyed it and thought it was a pretty exciting movie overall. And as we wrap up today's episode, please focus on to whom you direct your admiration. So often we look up to people who really do not live up to what a hero or role model should be. We make heroes out of famous people just because they're famous. I'd like to challenge you to get to know the heroes I focus on in these stories. They have sacrificed so much of their lives to protect the freedoms we enjoy. I'm not saying that famous people do not deserve our admiration. I have profound respect for musicians and athletes. What they can do on the field or on stage shows remarkable talent. I just do not believe that being able to carry a tune or hit a ball well is even in the same league as putting your life on the line serving others. Anyway, this brings us to the end of another episode of Random History. I can't believe I've done 25 of these so far. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it and will come back and listen to future episodes. If you'd like to view the transcript or sources for this episode, click on the link in the description. You can always make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link or shooting us an email. I also wanted to let you know that Argos Media, my producer, has designed some merch that is available through links on the description as well. And, as always, I want to thank Argos Media for producing Random History and to thank my wife for her continued support and inspiration. So until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.